The stagecoach rattled into Aspen, Colorado on a bitter January morning in 1878, carrying a woman whose swollen left eye told a story before her lips ever could. Samuel Zimmerman was checking the cinch on his horse outside the general store when he noticed her step down from the coach, one gloved hand gripping the door frame for support. She wore a dark blue traveling dress that had seen better days, and a bonnet that cast shadows across her face, but it could not hide the purple bruise that bloomed across her cheekbone like a terrible flower. She moved carefully, as if even the act of breathing hurt, and kept her gaze fixed on the muddy street beneath her worn boots. Something in Samuel's chest tightened at the sight. He had seen plenty of violence in his 32 years, had witnessed the cruelty that men could inflict on one another during the war and in the lawless years that followed. But there was something about seeing that mark on a woman's face that made his jaw clench and his hands curl into fists at his sides. She collected a single worn carpetbag from the driver, paid him with coins she counted out slowly from a small purse, and stood on the wooden sidewalk as the stage pulled away, leaving her alone in a town where she clearly knew no one. She looked up and down the street with that one good eye, the other swollen nearly shut, and Samuel could see the moment when the reality of her situation settled over her shoulders like a heavy yoke. Her spine straightened despite whatever pain she carried, and she started walking toward the boarding house at the end of the main street. Samuel found himself following at a respectful distance. He was not sure why exactly, except that something told him this woman needed someone watching her back, even if she did not know it yet. He had lived in Aspen for 3 years now, working the small ranch he had built up from nothing just outside of town. He knew the boarding house, knew its proprietor, Mrs. Delacroix, was a decent woman who would not turn away someone in need. The woman mounted the steps to the boarding house and knocked. Samuel paused by the water trough across the street, pretending to let his horse drink while he watched. Mrs. Delacroix opened the door, took one look at her visitor, and immediately ushered her inside with the kind of maternal efficiency that spoke of a woman who had seen trouble before and knew how to handle it. Samuel returned to his errands, but his mind kept wandering back to that bruised face and the determined set of those shoulders. He finished his business at the general store, picked up supplies at the feed and grain, and stopped by the blacksmith to collect the hinge he had ordered for his barn door. But as the afternoon sun began its descent toward the peaks of the Rocky Mountains, he found himself walking back toward the boarding house. He knocked, and Mrs. Delacroix answered, wiping flour-dusted hands on her apron. She was a stout woman in her 50s with kind eyes and no-nonsense demeanor. "Samuel Zimmerman, what brings you by at this hour?" "Afternoon, madam. I was wondering about your new guest, the lady who arrived on the stage this morning." Mrs. Delacroix's expression softened with understanding. "You saw her then?" "Hard not to notice. Is she settling in all right?" "She is." "Poor thing. Name is Nora Ashford. She is resting now. Traveled a long way from what little she has told me." Mrs. Delacroix studied him with shrewd eyes. "Why the interest, Samuel?" He removed his hat and turned it in his hands, a habit when he was thinking. "Just wanted to make sure she was safe. If she needs anything." "That's kind of you. I will let her know." Mrs. Delacroix hesitated, then added quietly, "She has that look, you know, the one women get when they have run as far as they can and hope it's far enough." Samuel nodded slowly. He knew that look too. Had seen it on his own mother's face years ago, before his father finally drank himself to death and freed them all. "If she needs work, I could use help at the ranch. Nothing improper, understand. I am thinking she might need honest employment. I can pay fair wages." "I will mention it to her when she wakes." Mrs. Delacroix smiled at him. "You are a good man, Samuel Zimmerman. Your mother raised you right." He felt heat creep up his neck at the praise. Just trying to help is all. That night, Samuel lay in his bunk at the ranch and stared at the ceiling, unable to shake the image of Nora Ashford from his mind. Not just the bruise, though that haunted him, but the quiet dignity with which she had carried herself. She had not looked for pity or help. She had simply arrived, claimed her space in the world, and prepared to move forward despite whatever darkness chased her. The next morning, he was mending fence line when he saw a figure walking up the road toward his property. As she drew closer, he recognized Nora Ashford. The swelling around her eye had gone down slightly, though the bruise had deepened to a darker purple. She wore the same blue dress, and in the morning light, he could see it had been carefully mended in several places. Samuel set down his tools and walked to meet her, removing his work gloves as he approached. Up close, he could see she was younger than he had first thought, perhaps 25 or 26, with dark auburn hair pulled back in a simple bun and gray-green eyes that held both wariness and determination. "Miss Ashford," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. "Mr. Zimmerman." Her voice was softer than he expected, with a slight tremor that suggested she was not entirely comfortable approaching a strange man. "Yes, madam. Mrs. Delacroix mentioned I might expect you. She said you have work. I am not afraid of hard labor and I learn quickly." Nora lifted her chin slightly, meeting his gaze with her good eye. "I need honest employment and I am willing to earn my keep." "The work is not easy," Samuel said carefully. "I run cattle, have a small vegetable garden, chickens, and a milk cow. Could use help with the cooking, the garden, the animals, general upkeep of the place. I can pay $30 a month plus meals while you are working. You would still board at Mrs. Delacroix's place. I would expect you here by sunrise and you can head back around supper time." "That is generous." Something flickered across her face, relief perhaps. "When can I start?" "Today, if you are up to it, though I'm thinking you might want to rest another day or two." "I am fine." The words came quickly, defensively, then softer. "I need to work, need to keep busy." Samuel understood that too. Sometimes the only way to outrun your demons was to exhaust yourself so completely that sleep came before the memories could. "All right then. Come on, I will show you around." He gave her a tour of the small ranch, showing her the chicken coop where 8 hens scratched and clucked, the vegetable garden that would need tending come spring, the milk cow Bessie who regarded them with placid eyes, and finally, the cabin he had built with his own hands. It was simple but solid. One main room with a kitchen area, a table, 2 chairs, his bunk in one corner, and a stone fireplace he had labored over for weeks to get right. "It is not much," he said, suddenly seeing the place through her eyes and feeling self-conscious about its rough bachelor quarters quality. "It is yours," Nora said simply. "That is everything." The weight behind those words told him volumes about what she had left behind. They fell into an easy rhythm that first day. Samuel showed her where he kept supplies, how he liked his coffee, the way Bessie preferred to be milked. Nora moved through the tasks with quiet competence, asking questions when she needed to, but mostly just observing and learning. She was careful to maintain distance between them, and Samuel respected that, never moving too close, always keeping his voice gentle and his movements predictable. By the time the sun began to set and Samuel prepared to walk her back to town, they had fallen into a comfortable silence that felt almost companionable. "You did good work today," Samuel said as they walked the dirt road back to Aspen. "If you still want the position, it is yours. I want it." Nora glanced at him, then away. "Thank you for giving me a chance. Not many would. Everyone deserves a chance to start over." He paused, weighing his next words carefully. I do not know your story, Miss Ashford, and you do not have to tell me if you do not want to. But I want you to know that while you are working for me on my land, you are safe. I give you my word on that." She stopped walking and turned to face him fully. In the fading light, her bruise looked almost black against her pale skin. "Why are you being kind to me?" "Because someone should be." Samuel met her gaze steadily. "And because I promise you, that bruise you are wearing will be the last pain you ever know if I have anything to say about it." Tears welled in her eyes and she blinked them back rapidly. "You cannot promise that. Maybe not. But I can sure as hell try." They reached the boarding house and Nora climbed the steps. At the door, she turned back to him. "Mr. Zimmerman." "Samuel, just Samuel." "Samuel." She tried the name and it sounded good in her voice. "Thank you for today, for everything. See you tomorrow morning, Miss Ashford. Nora." Just Nora. He tipped his hat to her. "See you tomorrow morning, Nora." The weeks that followed established a pattern that became comfortable in its reliability. Nora arrived each morning just as dawn broke over the mountains, her breath visible in the cold January air. Samuel would have coffee ready, and they would share a cup before beginning the day's work. At first, their conversations were brief and practical, discussions of tasks that needed doing and observations about the animals or the weather. But gradually, as the bruise on Nora's face faded from purple to yellow to gone entirely, their talks expanded to include other topics. Samuel learned that Nora had grown up in St. Louis, the daughter of a schoolteacher who had died when she was 16. She had married young, too young, she said, to a man who had seemed charming during their courtship but had revealed a different nature once the vows were spoken. She did not go into details about what had driven her to flee, and Samuel did not press. The haunted look that sometimes crossed her face told him enough. Nora learned that Samuel had been a soldier in the war, fighting for the Union despite being raised in Missouri, where loyalties were divided. He had come west afterward, unable to settle back into the life he had known before, looking for space and freedom, and a chance to build something that was wholly his own. His parents were both dead, and he had a sister somewhere in California he had not seen in 5 years but exchanged letters with twice a year. "You miss her?" Nora asked one morning as they worked together in the barn, mucking out stalls. "Every day," Samuel admitted. "But I understand why she needed distance. After everything with our father, she wanted to start fresh where no one knew our name or our history. That is why I came here." Nora leaned on her pitchfork, a strand of auburn hair escaping from beneath her kerchief. "I wanted to go somewhere I could just be Nora, not somebody's wife or daughter or property, just myself." "You are doing a fine job of it." Samuel paused in his work. "You have taken to ranch life better than most." She smiled, and Samuel realized it was the first genuine smile he had seen from her. It transformed her face, lighting her eyes and softening features that had been held tight with tension. "I like the work. I like the animals. I like the quiet." She hesitated. "I like not being afraid all the time." "You never have to be afraid again." The words came out more intense than Samuel had intended, and he cleared his throat. "What I mean is, you are safe here, for as long as you want to stay." Something shifted in the air between them, a subtle change in the easy friendship they had been building. Nora held his gaze for a long moment, and Samuel saw recognition there, an acknowledgement of feelings neither of them was quite ready to name. "I should get back to the house," Nora said finally. "That bread dough has probably risen enough by now." Samuel watched her walk away, his heart doing strange things in his chest. He had not expected this when he offered her employment. Had not expected to find himself looking forward to each morning's arrival, to the sound of her humming while she worked, to the way she bit her lower lip when she was concentrating on a task. He had not expected to care, but he did care. more than he probably should. February brought heavy snows that blanketed the valley in white and made the roads into Aspen treacherous. Samuel insisted that Nora stay at the ranch during the worst of the storms, rigging up a privacy curtain in one corner of the cabin where she could sleep, while he took the floor by the fire. It was all perfectly proper, and Mrs. Delacroix understood when Samuel rode into town to explain the situation. "You are a good man, Samuel," the older woman said, patting his arm. "I trust you to be a gentleman." "Always, madam, and Samuel, that girl is healing. Not just the bruise we could all see, but the ones we could not. You are good for her." Those Snowden days were some of the best Samuel could remember. They played cards by the fire, read aloud from the few books Samuel owned, and talked for hours about everything and nothing. Nora taught him how to make proper biscuits, and he showed her how to carve small figures from wood, a skill he had learned as a boy. She was not very good at it, and her attempts at carving a horse looked more like a lumpy dog, which made them both laugh until their sides hurt. It was during one of those long evenings, with snow falling soft and steady outside the cabin windows, that things between them shifted again. They were sitting by the fire, Samuel in his chair and Nora on the floor with her back against the stone hearth, when she said quietly, "Can I tell you something? Anything? I was married for 4 years. 4 years of walking on eggshells, trying to be perfect enough that he would not get angry. But it was never enough. I was never enough." She stared into the flames. "The night I left, he came home drunk. I had burned the roast just a little, but it was enough. He hit me, and when I fell, he kicked me, told me I was worthless, told me no one would ever want me." Samuel's hands clenched on the arms of his chair, but he kept his voice calm. "He was wrong. I know that now, but that night, lying on the floor, I believed him. I believed I deserved it somehow, that I had caused it." She turned to look at Samuel. "Do you know what changed?" "What?" "I saw my face in the mirror the next morning, saw what he had done, and I realized that if I stayed, I would end up dead. So I took what little money I had hidden away, packed a bag, and left while he was passed out. I did not leave a note, did not say goodbye, I just ran." "Good." Samuel leaned forward in his chair. "That took more courage than most people have." "It did not feel like courage. It felt like desperation." "Sometimes they are the same thing." He paused. "Is he looking for you?" "I do not know. Maybe, probably." Fear flickered across her face. "I used my maiden name when I bought the stage ticket, told them I was going to Denver, then I changed coaches and came here instead. But if he wants to find me badly enough, then he will have to go through me." Samuel said it simply, as a statement of fact rather than a boast. "And I do not go down easy." Nora's eyes glistened with tears. "Why do you care so much? You barely know me." "I know enough." Samuel got up from his chair and sat on the floor beside her, careful to leave space between them. "I know you are brave and kind and hardworking. I know you sing to the chickens when you collect eggs because you think it makes them happier. I know you save the bits of fat from the bacon to give to the barn cat who pretends he does not like you. I know that you face each day with your head up even when I can tell you are scared. That is enough." "Samuel." She said his name like a prayer or a question or both. "I care about you, Nora. More than I probably should, given I am your employer and you have been through hell and probably do not need some cowboy getting feelings he has no right to." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated with his own inability to express what he felt. "But I do care. And I want you to know that you are safe here. Not just from him, but from me too. I will never push you or rush you or ask for anything you are not ready to give. You have my word." Nora reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. They sat like that for a long time, watching the fire burn down to embers, hands joined and hearts beginning to heal. March brought the first hints of spring, and with it, a subtle shift in the relationship between Nora and Samuel. They still maintained the careful boundaries they had established, but there was an awareness now, an acknowledgement of the feelings growing between them. Samuel found himself looking for excuses to be near her, to catch the scent of the lavender soap she used, to hear her laugh at something he said. Nora started lingering in the evenings, reluctant to return to town, even when the weather was clear. One afternoon, they were working together to repair a section of fence that had come down during a storm when a rider appeared on the road. Samuel tensed, one hand moving instinctively to the rifle he kept nearby, but relaxed when he recognized Sheriff Tom Hutchins. "Afternoon, Samuel," the sheriff called out as he dismounted. He was a solid man in his 40s with a weather-beaten face and keen eyes that missed little. "Miss Ashford." "Sheriff." Samuel shook his hand. "What brings you out this way? Needed to speak with you both, actually." He glanced at Nora, and Samuel noticed the way she had gone very still, like a rabbit sensing a fox. "Had a man come through town yesterday asking questions. Said he was looking for his wife who ran off. Had a description that sounded an awful lot like you, Miss Ashford." All the color drained from Nora's face. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing. Told him I had not seen anyone matching that description." The sheriff's expression was kind. "But he is staying at the hotel. Name he gave was Frank Ashford, my husband." The words came out barely above a whisper. "That is what I figured." Sheriff Hutchins looked at Samuel. "Thought you both should know. He has been drinking heavy and asking questions all over town. Mrs. Delacroix sent him packing when he tried to inquire there, told him she did not discuss her guests with anyone, but it is only a matter of time before he figures out where she is. Then we need to be ready." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Thank you for the warning, Sheriff. There is more." Hutchins shifted his weight. "I do not have cause to arrest him or run him out of town. He has not broken any laws here. But between you and me, I do not like the look of him. He has that mean drunk quality about him. You watch yourself, Samuel. And Miss Ashford, you might want to stay out here for a few days rather than going back and forth to town." After the sheriff left, Nora stood frozen by the fence line, staring at nothing. Samuel approached her slowly. "Nora," he found me. Her voice was hollow. "I ran so far and he still found me. He found the town. He has not found you yet." Samuel took her gently by the shoulders, waiting until she met his eyes. "Listen to me. You are not alone in this anymore. Whatever happens, we face it together. Do you understand? I cannot ask you to fight my battles. You are not asking. I am offering." He let his hands slide down her arms to take her hands in his. "That promise I made you, remember? No more pain. I meant it, Nora. And I will be damned if I let some bastard who thinks he owns you come onto my land and prove me wrong." She threw her arms around his neck, burying her face against his shoulder. Samuel held her close, one hand cradling the back of her head while she shook with silent sobs. He murmured gentle words, promises and reassurances, and vowed silently that Frank Ashford would have to kill him before he let the man lay another hand on Nora. They stayed at the ranch that night, and the next, falling back into the routine from the snowy February days. But there was a tension now, a waiting quality to each moment. Samuel kept his rifle loaded and within reach. He taught Nora how to shoot, taking her out beyond the barn to practice with his pistol until she could at least hit the side of a tree more often than not. "I do not want to shoot anyone," she said, staring at the gun in her hands like it was a snake. "I know, but I want you to be able to if you have to." Samuel stood behind her, adjusting her stance. "Self-defense is not murder, Nora, it is survival." On the fourth day, Frank Ashford came. Samuel saw him first, a lone rider coming up the road in the late afternoon. He recognized the aggressive set of the man's shoulders, the way he rode like he owned whatever he surveyed. Samuel sent Nora into the cabin with the pistol and instructions to stay inside no matter what she heard. He met Frank Ashford in the yard, rifle held loosely in both hands, not quite pointing at the man but not exactly pointing away either. "Can I help you?" Samuel kept his voice neutral. Frank was a big man, running to fat but still solid, with a florid face and mean eyes. "I am looking for my wife. Been told she might be here." "I do not know your wife. Her name is Nora. About this tall, brown hair, probably told you some story about me being a bad husband." Frank dismounted, and Samuel noticed the way he swayed slightly. Drunk already, even though it was barely past 3 o'clock. "She's got some fool idea about leaving me, but she is confused. I just want to take her home where she belongs. If there was a woman here who did not want to see you, I would say her wishes matter more than yours." Frank's face darkened. "That is my wife you are talking about. She belongs to me, bought and paid for legal. Now stop wasting my time and bring her out here." "No, no." Frank's hand moved to the gun at his hip. "You are standing between a man and his property, Cowboy. That is a good way to get yourself killed. She is not property. She is a person with her own choices." Samuel's voice remained calm, but his grip on the rifle shifted almost imperceptibly. "And her choice is not to see you, so I am going to have to ask you to leave my land. Or what? Or I will remove you from it." They stared at each other for a long moment. Samuel could see Frank calculating, weighing his chances. The man was armed and angry and drunk, a dangerous combination. But Samuel had fought in the war, had faced down Confederates and outlaws and worse. He knew how to keep his nerve. Finally, Frank spat in the dirt. "This is not over. That woman is my wife and I have got legal rights. I will be back with the law. You do that. Sheriff already knows the situation. Good luck getting him on your side." Frank mounted his horse with clumsy movements, yanking hard on the reins in a way that made the animal toss its head. "She is not worth it, you know. Whatever she is giving you, it is not worth dying for." "That is where you are wrong." Samuel met his gaze steadily. "Now get off my land." After Frank rode away, Samuel waited a full 5 minutes before returning to the cabin. He found Nora sitting at the table, the pistol in front of her, her whole body shaking. "Is he gone?" she whispered. "For now." Samuel set the rifle aside and knelt beside her chair. "But he will be back. He is not the type to give up easy. I should leave. Go somewhere else. He will kill you, Samuel. He will try." Samuel took her hands in his. "But I am harder to kill than I look, and I am not letting you run again, Nora. You have found a home here, found yourself here. I will be damned if I let him take that away from you." "Why?" Tears streamed down her face. "Why are you willing to risk so much for me?" Samuel reached up and cupped her face gently in his hands, thumbs brushing away her tears. "Because I love you. Because somewhere between that first morning you showed up for work and now you became the most important thing in my world. Because when I think about my future, you are in every part of it." He searched her eyes. "Because you deserve someone who will fight for you instead of someone who makes you need to fight." "Samuel." She leaned into his touch. "I love you too. I think I have for a while now, but I am so scared." "I know, but we will figure this out together." He pulled her into his arms, and she clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a shifting world. They went to see Sheriff Hutchins the next morning, riding together into Aspen with Samuel's rifle across his saddle. The sheriff listened to their account of Frank's visit, his expression growing grimmer. "The trouble is, the law is on his side," Hutchins said reluctantly. "She is his legal wife. If he wants to take her back to St. Louis, I do not have grounds to stop him, even if he beats her." Samuel's voice was hard. "You know how it is, Samuel. What a man does with his wife in his own home, most judges consider his business." The sheriff looked at Nora with sympathy. I do not like it any more than you do, but that is the way things are. Then we need to change the way things are." Nora spoke up, her voice stronger than Samuel expected. "Sheriff, if Frank comes for me, I will not go willingly, and if he tries to force me, that is kidnapping, is it not?" "That is a stretch, madam. But not impossible." She leaned forward. "If I refuse to leave with him, if he has to physically force me or threaten violence, surely that crosses some line." Hutchins rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "It might, especially if there are witnesses. And if he is drunk and disorderly, well, I can hold him on that charge at least." He looked between them. "Where are you going with this, Miss Ashford?" "I am saying that if Frank comes back, I want to face him, but I want to do it in town with witnesses, with you there to keep the peace." Nora's hands were clenched in her lap, but her voice remained steady. "I want to tell him to his face that I am not going back, that I am done being afraid, and I want everyone to hear me do it." Samuel reached over and took her hand. "You do not have to do this." "Yes, I do." She looked at him with clear eyes. "I have been running and hiding. But you have taught me that I can be strong, that I have worth. So I need to stand up to him once and for all, not for him, for me." The sheriff nodded slowly. "All right then. We will do it your way. When he comes back, and he will come back, you be ready. We will end this proper." They did not have to wait long. 2 days later, Frank Ashford rode into Aspen in the middle of the afternoon, heading straight for the sheriff's office. Samuel and Nora were there waiting, along with Sheriff Hutchins, Mrs. Delacroix, and several other townspeople who had gotten wind of the situation and wanted to show their support. Frank dismounted and stormed into the office, pulling up short when he saw the gathering. "What the hell is this?" "This is your wife telling you she is not going anywhere with you," Sheriff Hutchins said calmly, "and we are all here to witness it. That is not how this works." Frank focused on Nora, his face reddening. "You are my wife. You do not get to just leave." "I already left." Nora stood up, and Samuel saw the way her hands trembled, but her voice was clear and strong. "I left because you hurt me, Frank, because you made me afraid in my own home, because I realized that staying with you meant dying, either all at once or piece by piece. I never meant to hurt you. You just made me so angry sometimes." "No," Nora shook her head. "You do not get to blame me for your violence. You chose to hit me. You chose to kick me. You chose to make me feel worthless. Those were your choices, not mine." "Nora, come on." Frank tried for a conciliatory tone, reaching toward her. "We can work this out. Come home with me and I promise things will be different." "They will not be different. They never are." She stepped back and Samuel moved to her side, a silent support. "I am not coming back, Frank. I want a divorce." "A divorce?" Frank laughed, but there was no humor in it. "On what grounds? Because you are too delicate for married life. On the grounds that you beat me. On the grounds of cruelty and abuse." Nora pulled down the collar of her dress slightly, revealing faint yellow remnants of bruising on her collarbone. "I have witnesses who saw what you did to me. Mrs. Delacroix here can testify. Sheriff Hutchins can testify that you came here hunting me down. And I will tell any judge who will listen exactly what kind of husband you were." Frank's expression turned ugly. "You think any judge will take your word over mine? You are just a hysterical woman making up stories." "Maybe they will, maybe they will not." Nora lifted her chin. "But I am not coming back with you. Not today. Not ever. So you have 2 choices, Frank. You can get on your horse and ride out of here, or you can cause trouble and spend the night in jail." "What's it going to be?" For a moment, Samuel thought Frank might lunge for her. His hands clenched into fists, and violence radiated from him like heat. But then he saw all the witnesses, saw the sheriff's hand resting on his gun, saw Samuel's protective stance, and seemed to realize he was outnumbered. "This is not over," Frank said, his voice low and venomous. You are still my wife, and I will not let you go this easy. Then I will see you in court. Nora did not waver. Until then, stay away from me. Frank looked like he wanted to say more, but Sheriff Hutchins cleared his throat meaningfully. I think the lady has made herself clear. Time for you to leave, Ashford. After Frank left, slamming the door behind him, Nora sagged against Samuel like all the strength had just drained out of her. He caught her, holding her up while the gathered townspeople erupted into supportive murmurs. You were so brave, Mrs. Delacroix said, taking Nora's hand. I am proud of you, dear. Is it really over? Nora asked the sheriff. For now, Hutchins said honestly. He might try to cause trouble still, but you have made your position clear with plenty of witnesses. That counts for something. He paused. But getting a divorce, especially out here, that is going to be difficult. I do not care how difficult it is. Nora straightened, finding some reserve of strength. I will fight for it as long as it takes. Over the next few weeks, life gradually returned to a new kind of normal. Frank stayed at the hotel in town for a few more days, drinking heavily and making dark threats, but he seemed to realize he was not going to get what he wanted through force. Eventually, he rode out, though not before promising this was not finished. Nora and Samuel consulted with a lawyer from Denver who happened to be passing through Aspen. He was honest with them about the challenges ahead. Divorce was difficult to obtain, especially in territories where the laws still heavily favored husbands. But there were grounds for it, cruelty being one of them, and with enough witnesses and documentation it was possible. It could take months, maybe years, the lawyer warned, and it will not be cheap. I do not care, Nora said, whatever it takes. Samuel sold off some of his cattle to pay the lawyer's fees. Nora protested, but he would not hear of it. This is an investment in our future, he told her. Both of ours. Spring turned to summer, and the legal proceedings began slowly grinding forward. Depositions were taken, documents filed, letters sent back and forth between Colorado and Missouri. It was tedious and frustrating, but Nora threw herself into it with determination. She was done being a victim. Meanwhile, life on the ranch continued. The vegetable garden flourished under Nora's care. The chickens laid eggs faithfully. Bessie the cow produced milk every morning, and Samuel and Nora grew closer with each passing day. They still maintained separate living arrangements, with Nora boarding at Mrs. Delacroix's place in town. It was proper and respectable, and neither of them wanted to give Frank any ammunition to use against them in the divorce proceedings. But their feelings for each other were no secret. Everyone in Aspen could see the way Samuel looked at Nora like she hung the moon, the way Nora smiled when he was near. On a warm July evening, they sat together on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sun set over the mountains and paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Nora leaned against Samuel's shoulder, and he had his arm around her, holding her close. You ever regret it? She asked quietly. Getting involved with me in all my problems? Not even for a second. Samuel pressed a kiss to the top of her head. You are not a problem, Nora. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Even with all the legal troubles, the money it is costing, the possibility that Frank might come back, even with all of that. He tilted her face up to his. I told you that first day that your bruise would be the last pain you ever knew. I meant it then, and I mean it now. Whatever we have to go through to get you free of him, it is worth it. You are worth it. Tears glistened in her eyes. I love you so much, Samuel Zimmerman. I love you too, Nora Ashford, he smiled. Though hopefully someday soon that last name will change. Nora Zimmerman, she tried the name out. I like the sound of that. So do I. He kissed her then, gentle and sweet, a promise of all the tomorrows they would share once the past finally released its hold on her. August brought word from the lawyer. Frank had contested the divorce, naturally. claiming Nora was lying about the abuse and accusing Samuel of alienation of affection. It was going to get uglier before it got better. "He is claiming I seduced you away from him," Nora said, reading the lawyer's letter with disbelief. "That you were waiting to steal another man's wife. Let him claim whatever he wants." Samuel was mending a bridle, his hands working the leather with practiced ease. "The truth is on our side. But what if the judge believes him? What if they decide I have to go back?" Samuel set down the bridle and came to kneel in front of where she sat. "Then we will run. We will go to California or Canada or Mexico if we have to, wherever we need to go to be together and keep you safe. I do not want you to have to give up your ranch, your home." "A home is not a place, Nora. It is wherever you are." He took her hands in his. "I built this ranch from nothing. I can do it again anywhere, but I cannot replace you. I would not even want to try." She kissed him hard, pouring all her love and fear and gratitude into it. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "We will get through this," he promised. "Together." The legal battle dragged on through the fall and into winter. Frank's lawyer tried every tactic, from claiming Nora had abandoned her marital duties to suggesting she was mentally unstable. The process was exhausting and humiliating, requiring Nora to recount in painful detail the abuse she had suffered. But through it all, Samuel was there. He attended every meeting with the lawyers when he could. He held Nora when the stress became too much and she broke down in tears. He reminded her constantly of her own strength and worth. The town of Aspen rallied around them too. Mrs. Delacroix provided testimony about the state Nora had arrived in. Sheriff Hutchins gave a deposition about Frank's threatening behavior. Even people who barely knew Nora came forward to vouch for her character and to speak to the changes they had witnessed in her since coming to Colorado. "This town takes care of its own," Mrs. Delacroix told Nora one evening over tea. "And you are one of ours now, dear." It was a cold January morning in 1879, exactly 1 year after Nora had first arrived in Aspen when the telegram came. The divorce had been granted. A judge in Missouri, presented with overwhelming evidence of Frank's cruelty and abuse, had dissolved the marriage. Nora was free. She read the telegram 3 times, not quite believing it, before the reality sank in. Then she ran from Mrs. Delacroix's boarding house all the way out to the ranch, not even bothering with a coat despite the freezing temperature. Samuel was in the barn when she burst through the door, breathless and wild-eyed. He dropped the bucket he was carrying, water sloshing across the floor, and rushed to her. "What is wrong? What happened?" "Nothing is wrong," she laughed, the sound bright with joy and relief. "Everything is right. The divorce came through, Samuel. I am free. Actually, legally, finally free." He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. When he set her down, he kept his hands on her waist, looking at her with such love it made her heart ache. "Marry me," he said. "What?" "Marry me, Nora. Right now, today, as soon as we can find a preacher. I have waited a year to ask you properly, and I am not waiting another day." "Yes." She did not hesitate. "Yes, yes. 1,000 times yes." They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the church in Aspen, with Mrs. Delacroix and Sheriff Hutchins standing as witnesses and half the town in attendance. Nora wore a new dress that the women of Aspen had pitched in to buy for her, a soft green that brought out her eyes. Samuel wore his best suit, the one he had bought when he first homesteaded the ranch, and looked so handsome Nora could barely breathe. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Samuel kissed her with such tenderness and joy that she felt like she was floating. This was nothing like her first wedding, a hasty affair with a man she barely knew. This was everything a marriage should be, built on love and trust and respect. The town threw them a celebration at the church hall, with food and music and dancing. Mrs. Delacroix cried happy tears. Sheriff Hutchins gave a toast wishing them long life and happiness. And Samuel and Nora danced together, holding each other close and marveling at how far they had come. "A year ago I thought my life was over," Nora said softly as they swayed to the music. "I thought I would never be happy or safe again. And now," Samuel smiled down at her, "now I know it was just beginning." She reached up and touched his face, still amazed that she was allowed to do so freely, that this incredible man was hers. "Thank you for keeping your promise." "Which one?" "That the bruise I arrived with would be the last pain I ever knew." "You were right, Samuel. Since that first day, all you have given me is love and safety and hope. You gave me back myself." "You did that on your own, sweetheart. I just gave you a safe place to heal." "We healed each other," she corrected. "And we are going to build an amazing life together." "Yes, we are." He kissed her softly. "Starting right now." They spent their wedding night at the ranch, in the cabin that was now legally theirs together. Samuel had spent the previous days cleaning and rearranging, bringing in wildflowers despite it being winter, creating a space that felt like theirs rather than just his. He was gentle with her, patient, letting her set the pace as they explored this new aspect of their relationship. It was nothing like Nora's experiences with Frank had been. There was no pain, no fear, no demands. Just love and tenderness and a slow building passion that left them both breathless and amazed. Afterward they lay tangled together in the bed, Nora's head on Samuel's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I did not know it could be like this," she said quietly. "Like what?" "So gentle, so loving. I thought what Frank did was just how marriage was supposed to be." Samuel's arms tightened around her. "That was not love, Nora. What he did to you had nothing to do with love. What we have, this is what it is supposed to be. Two people choosing each other every day, treating each other with respect and tenderness." "I choose you," she said, tilting her head up to kiss his jaw. "Every day for the rest of my life I choose you, Samuel Zimmerman." "And I choose you, Nora Zimmerman." He smiled at her new name. "My wife." "Your wife," she repeated, loving the sound of it. "I am your wife." They made love again as the snow fell softly outside, and this time there was more confidence, more joy, more of a sense of coming home. And when they finally fell asleep in each other's arms, Nora slept without nightmares for the first time in years. The months that followed were the happiest of Nora's life. She settled fully into being mistress of the ranch, taking over more and more of the responsibilities. She expanded the vegetable garden, started raising turkeys alongside the chickens, and convinced Samuel to let her try her hand at beekeeping. The bees took to her immediately, and by summer they had honey to sell in town. Samuel was everything a husband should be. He never raised his voice to her in anger, never made her feel small or worthless. When they disagreed, which was rarely, they talked through it calmly. He asked her opinion on ranch decisions and listened to her advice. He surprised her with small gifts, wildflowers or a ribbon from town, or once, memorably, a young barn cat who promptly adopted Nora as her person. They fell into comfortable rhythms, working together during the day and spending their evenings talking, reading, making love. Samuel taught Nora to ride better, and they would go out together on horseback, exploring the mountains around Aspen. Nora taught Samuel to appreciate poetry, reading aloud to him while he worked on various projects. The town of Aspen embraced Nora fully as one of their own. She joined the Ladies' Aid Society and helped organize fundraisers for the church. She became friends with the other ranch wives in the area, women who understood the challenges and rewards of frontier life. She was happy in a way she had never imagined possible. In the fall of 1879, Nora realized she was pregnant. She was terrified to tell Samuel at first, memories of Frank's anger during her previous 2 pregnancies, both of which had ended in miscarriages he had blamed on her inadequacies, making her anxious. But Samuel's reaction was pure joy. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with delight, before carefully setting her down and immediately fretting about whether spinning her was bad for the baby. "I am going to be a father," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Nora asked, needing to hear it. "Happy? Nora, I am ecstatic, terrified but ecstatic." He knelt down and placed his hands gently on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. I am your father and I already love you more than I thought possible." Nora cried happy tears and thanked God for bringing her to this man, to this life. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Samuel was attentive without being overbearing, insisting she rest more but not treating her like she was made of glass. He built a cradle over the winter months, carving it carefully from pine and sanding it until it was smooth as silk. Nora sewed baby clothes and blankets, preparing for their child's arrival. In May of 1880, Nora went into labor. It was long and difficult, and there were moments when Samuel thought he might lose his mind from worry. But Mrs. Delacroix, who had attended more births than anyone could count, remained calm and competent, coaching Nora through it. And finally, just after dawn, their son was born. Samuel held the baby with shaking hands, staring down at the tiny, perfect face in awe. "He is beautiful," he whispered. "Nora, he is perfect." "What should we name him?" Nora asked, exhausted but glowing with happiness. They had discussed names for months, but looking at their son now, Samuel knew what felt right. "Samuel, after my grandfather, if that is all right with you, Samuel Jr." Nora smiled. "It is perfect." Little Samuel, or Sammy as they quickly started calling him, was a good baby. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's gray-green eyes, and both parents were immediately, completely besotted. Samuel would come in from working the ranch and head straight for the cradle to check on his son. Nora sang to the baby constantly, soft lullabies and nonsense songs that made him coo. "I never knew I could love something this much," Samuel said one night, watching Nora nurse the baby. "I look at him and I think my heart might burst." "I know what you mean." Nora gazed down at Sammy. "Sometimes I am terrified something will happen to him, that something will take this happiness away." "Nothing is going to take this away from us." Samuel came and sat beside them, wrapping his arm around Nora's shoulders. "We have built something strong here, a real family, a real home. That is not going anywhere." But life had other plans. In July, word came through Aspen that Frank Ashford had been killed in St. Louis, shot in a bar fight over a card game. The news arrived via telegram, forwarded by the lawyer who had handled Nora's divorce. Nora read it twice, then handed it to Samuel without a word. She felt strange, disconnected. This was the man she had been married to, who she had once tried to love. But she felt no grief, only a distant sense of relief that he could never threaten her again. "How do you feel?" Samuel asked carefully. "I do not know." Nora looked down at Sammy, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "Is it wrong that I am glad, that I feel like a weight has been lifted?" "No, sweetheart, that is not wrong at all." Samuel pulled her close. "He hurt you, he made you afraid. You do not owe him grief. I just feel free now, truly free, like the last shadow hanging over us is finally gone." She looked up at Samuel. "Does that make me a terrible person?" "It makes you honest." He kissed her forehead. "And it means we can finally close that chapter completely and focus on our future." They buried the telegram in the back of a drawer and did not speak of Frank again. The years flowed by like water, bringing changes and growth. Sammy grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the ranch and followed his father everywhere. In 1882, Nora gave birth to a daughter they named Lily, a cheerful baby who rarely cried and seemed to find everything delightful. 2 years later came another son, Matthew, who was quieter than his siblings but deeply thoughtful. The ranch prospered under Samuel and Nora's combined efforts. They increased their cattle herd, added more chickens, and Nora's honey business grew so successful that stores in Denver started placing regular orders. They built an addition onto the cabin, adding 2 more rooms so the children could have their own space. Aspen grew too, transitioning from a rough frontier town into a more settled community. New families arrived, businesses opened, and a proper schoolhouse was built. Nora volunteered as a teacher's assistant, wanting to give back to the community that had embraced her. Through it all, Samuel and Nora's love only deepened. They still made time for each other despite the demands of the ranch and the children. They still danced in the kitchen when no one was watching. They still talked for hours, sharing dreams and memories and plans for the future. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1889, Samuel took Nora up into the mountains for a picnic, leaving the children with Mrs. Delacroix for the afternoon. They rode to a high meadow where wildflowers bloomed in riotous color, and the view stretched for miles. "Do you remember the first time I brought you up here?" Samuel asked as they sat on a blanket, the remains of their meal spread around them. "Of course. It was that spring after we married. I had never seen anything so beautiful. I was so nervous." Samuel laughed at the memory. "I wanted everything to be perfect, wanted to show you that choosing me, choosing this life, was the right decision. It was the best decision I ever made." Nora leaned against him. "You saved me, Samuel, not just from Frank, but from a life where I did not know my own worth. You taught me that I deserved love and respect and happiness. You always deserved those things. I just got lucky enough to be the one to give them to you." He pulled a small box from his pocket. "I got you something." Inside was a delicate gold locket. Nora opened it to find tiny photographs of their 3 children on one side and Samuel on the other. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "I wanted you to have something to remind you of all we have built together, our family, our love, our life." Samuel fastened it around her neck. 10 years ago, you arrived in Aspen with a black eye and more courage than most soldiers I have known. And I promised you that would be the last pain you ever knew. Do you think I kept that promise?" Nora turned in his arms to face him fully. "You have given me nothing but love and joy and safety. You have been the best husband, the best father, the best partner I could ever imagine. So yes, Samuel Zimmerman, you kept your promise. You kept it every single day for 10 years, and I will keep it for 50 more if I can." He kissed her deeply, pouring a decade of love into it. "I love you, Nora, more today than I did when we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. I love you too, forever and always." They made love there in the meadow under the vast blue Colorado sky, and it was just as passionate and tender as it had been on their wedding night. Life continued its steady pace. The children grew. Sammy showed an aptitude for working with horses and started helping train them. Lily was artistic, always drawing or painting, covering any scrap of paper she could find with images of the ranch and the mountains. Matthew loved books and could read by the time he was 4, constantly asking questions about everything. Samuel and Nora grew older together gracefully. Silver threaded through Samuel's dark hair, and lines appeared at the corners of his eyes from years of squinting in the sun. Nora's auburn hair faded slightly, and she developed a few gray strands she refused to pluck, saying they were badges of honor from raising 3 wild children. They faced challenges, of course. There were hard winters when feed ran low, a summer when drought threatened the crops. A scare when Lily got sick with fever and they thought they might lose her. But they faced everything together, their partnership only growing stronger with time. In 1895, Sammy fell in love with a girl from town, the daughter of the mercantile owner. Samuel and Nora gave their blessing, and the wedding was a joyous affair. Watching their son stand at the altar, Samuel reached over and took Nora's hand. "That was us once," he whispered. "Still is," she whispered back, squeezing his hand. They became grandparents in 1896, when Sammy and his wife had a daughter. Nora cried when she held her granddaughter for the first time, overwhelmed by the miracle of it all. This tiny, perfect baby was part of the legacy she and Samuel had created, proof that love and courage could overcome even the darkest pasts. Lily married a painter she met when he came through Aspen documenting the West, and they moved to San Francisco but visited regularly. Matthew decided to become a doctor, studying in Denver but always planning to return to Aspen to practice. As the new century approached, Samuel and Nora often sat on their porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the mountains they loved, and marveled at the life they had built. "If someone had told me 20 years ago that I would be this happy, I would not have believed them," Nora said one such evening. "I thought happiness was something for other people, not for me. But you found it anyway." Samuel had his arm around her shoulders, and she was curled against his side, their bodies fitting together as perfectly as they had 20 years before. "We found it together." Nora looked up at him. "I have been thinking lately about that day I arrived in Aspen, how terrified I was, how lost. I had no idea that I was about to meet the man who would change my entire life. I remember seeing you step off that stage, the bruise on your face, the way you held yourself like you were expecting another blow at any moment." Samuel's voice was soft with memory. "And I remember thinking I would do whatever it took to make sure no one ever hurt you again. And you did." Nora reached up and touched his face, tracing the lines that 20 years had etched there. "You kept that promise every single day. You gave me a life I never dreamed was possible. A home. A family. Love. Real, honest, faithful love. It was easy to keep that promise. Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the evening sounds of the ranch, the lowing of cattle in the distance, the chirp of crickets, the whisper of wind through the trees. "You have any regrets?" Nora asked. Samuel considered the question seriously. "No, not a single one. Everything I have done, every choice I made, it led me to you and to this life. How could I regret any of that? I regret the years I lost with Frank, the time I wasted being afraid. Those years made you who you are. They taught you strength and courage. Without them, you might not have had the bravery to leave, to start over, to take a chance on a rough cowboy with a small ranch." Samuel kissed the top of her head. "Everything happens for a reason, Nora. The hard times make the good times sweeter. You always know what to say." "I have had 20 years to practice." They laughed together, the sound easy and familiar, the laugh of two people who had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs side by side. As the years continued to pass, Samuel and Nora settled into the comfortable rhythm of older age. They handed over more and more of the ranch's day-to-day operations to Sammy and his family, who had moved into a house they built on the property. But Samuel still checked on the cattle every morning, and Nora still tended her garden and her bees. They took pleasure in simpler things now. Watching their grandchildren play, reading together by the fire, taking slow walks around the property. Each day was a gift, and they treated it as such. In the summer of 1903, they celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. All 3 of their children came home for it, along with grandchildren and in-laws. The party was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and lanterns strung between the trees. The whole town seemed to turn out, wanting to celebrate the couple who had become such a beloved part of the community. Mrs. Delacroix, now elderly but still sharp as a tack, gave a toast. I remember the day Nora arrived in Aspen. She was running from darkness, looking for light. And this man, she gestured to Samuel, he became that light. Together they have shown us all what love should look like, what partnership should look like, what a marriage should look like. So here is to 25 more years of showing the rest of us how it is done. Everyone raised their glasses and cheered. Later, when the party had wound down and it was just Samuel and Nora alone under the stars, she leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what? For keeping your promise. For 25 years of keeping your promise." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with tears of happiness. "That black eye I arrived with really was the last pain I knew. Oh, I have hurt since then, the way everyone hurts, the aches of childbirth and aging and loss. But I have never known pain the way I knew it before you. I have never felt small or worthless or afraid. You took away that pain and replaced it with joy." Samuel pulled her close, emotion thick in his throat. "Loving you has been the greatest honor of my life, Nora Zimmerman. And if I had it to do over, I would not change a single moment." "Neither would I," she kissed him softly. "Neither would I." They danced then, just the two of them under the stars, swaying to music only they could hear. And if their steps were slower than they had been 25 years ago, their love was deeper, richer, stronger for all they had weathered together. As the years rolled on, Samuel and Nora continued to live their lives fully. They were blessed with more grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. The ranch continued to thrive under the family's care. The town of Aspen grew and changed, but the Zimmerman Ranch remained a constant, a symbol of love and perseverance. Samuel and Nora grew old together, their hair white, their faces deeply lined, their bodies slower and frailer. But their love never dimmed. They still held hands. They still danced in the kitchen. They still looked at each other with the same love and wonder they had felt as newlyweds. On a bright autumn morning in 1918, Samuel passed away peacefully in his sleep, Nora's hand in his. He was 72 years old and had lived a full, rich life. The whole town turned out for his funeral, wanting to pay respects to a man who had been a pillar of the community and a shining example of what a good man should be. Nora grieved deeply, as anyone would who had lost their life partner. But even in her grief, she was grateful for the 40 years they had shared. She spoke at his funeral, her voice strong despite her tears. "Samuel Zimmerman saved my life. Not in some dramatic fashion, though there were dramatic moments, but in the quiet, daily way he loved me. In the respect he showed me. In the partnership he offered me. He took a broken woman and helped her become whole again. He gave me a family, a home, a life beyond anything I ever dreamed was possible, and he kept his promise. From that very first day until his very last breath, he kept his promise that I would know no more pain. He was the love of my life, my best friend, my partner. And I will spend whatever days I have left being grateful that I had the courage to step off that stagecoach in Aspen all those years ago, because it led me to him." Nora lived another 7 years, surrounded by her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. She remained active in the community, still tending her bays well into her 80s, still telling stories of the old days to anyone who would listen. And when she passed away peacefully in 1925, at the age of 72, her family found her wearing the locket Samuel had given her on their 10th anniversary. The photographs inside worn from years of being opened and closed, looked at and treasured. They buried her beside Samuel, under a wide Colorado sky, in a cemetery overlooking the ranch they had built together. The headstone was simple, bearing both their names and a single line that Nora had requested in her will. She arrived with a black eye. He promised it would be the last pain she ever knew. It was. Their love story became legend in Aspen, told and retold through the generations. The ranch remained in the family, passed down from Sammy to his children to his grandchildren. And every generation was taught about Samuel and Nora, about the courage it took for her to leave, the strength it took for him to love, and the beautiful life they built together. Years later, when Matthew's great-granddaughter was studying history in school and learning about the challenges women faced in the 19th century, she came home and asked her grandmother to tell her the story again. The story of how their ancestor, Nora, had escaped an abusive marriage and found true love with a cowboy named Samuel. And as the story was told once more, in a world so different from the one Samuel and Nora had known, their love lived on. A testament to the power of courage, the strength of true partnership, and the promise that one good person can change another person's entire life. Samuel and Nora Zimmerman had found each other in a time and place where women had few rights and fewer choices. They had built a love that transcended the limitations of their era, a partnership of equals, a marriage of mutual respect and deep affection. They had faced challenges and overcome them together. They had raised a family, built a legacy, and lived fully and well. And most importantly, Samuel had kept his promise. From that cold January morning in 1878 when Nora stepped off the stagecoach with a black eye, until his last breath 40 years later, he had ensured she knew only love, respect, and safety. He had taken away her pain and replaced it with joy. It was a promise kept, a love honored, a life well lived, and in the end that was everything